Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
It goes off the chart. Oh, I did it too. Never mind. Okay. Welcome, best friends, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
Yes, and we are in person
Andrew
for this
and
intro.
Michelle.
Yes. Michelle got a wonderful gift today.
She did get a wonderful gift. First of all, let's back up a little bit because we always get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
We are here in Missoula, Montana.
I've been here for
Saturday,
Sunday, Monday.
She's counting on her fingers, everyone.
Tuesday. I've been here for 4 days.
4 days.
3.5, really, because I landed midday.
Mm-hmm.
But Missoula is beautiful. Montana is gorgeous. Super happy that American Eagle Instruments has sent us out here.
Yeah.
This was
We're here for
an amazing opportunity.
An RDH summit. Is
that the official name? Yes, you're right.
I think it is.
Yes,
I think it is.
I think you're correct.
And we're here to learn about their manufacturing.
Yeah.
And their product line. And see if we could help them, give them thoughts or opinions.
Yeah.
Which Michelle's got plenty of those.
We
all know. To make things better and awesomer for them.
Most awesome for you clinicians.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking out for y'all.
Yeah.
I swear by it.
Oh, she does. She's not afraid to make any enemies with her opinion, so. As Lacey G22 knows very well.
That's my BFF. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well.
I'm also taking off one hygienist at a time. As I make
You're not taking him off. So, as you guys know, it's a running gag that Michelle steals all my friends, and it's always hygienists. And she posted a picture. I posted a picture. Someone posted a picture today. Oh, you did.
I did. Because Matt Crispine, and I went to, we got here first. Mm-hmm. We were the first of the group of people that are here. And so we went to a brewery, which was walking distance from the hotel, and I thought it would be funny to take a picture.
Yeah,
and rub
to
it in
try to make me jealous.
Face.
And the problem is, it made her last BFF that she stole from me very upset.
Daniel
but
Lopez,
just jokingly,
you will never be replaced ever.
Anyways, so today we went out with everyone.
Yep, we had a great dinner.
Just introduction. Yeah, it was fantastic. Montana is rustic.
So 70s, right?
But not
70s?
So much crushed felt and orange.
Like 70s lodge, like ski lodge.
Yeah,
hunt
definitely
lodge
that.
Kind of feel.
When you come into the airport, there are dead animal carcasses on the walls that are stuffed. And like a big old giant bear.
Part of it.
Well, it is a carcass, isn't it? It's dead,
is.
Right. It's the fur or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I honestly, I couldn't believe, I felt like a blast from the past. I'm like, what am I walking into right now? I
think that's so funny because you and I had apparently two different experiences. I walked into it and said, you want me to walk down these stairs with my suitcase? There's no escalator?
Oh, yeah.
I almost was confused, like I was going the wrong way, like I was not going down the right set of stairs.
I have a whole urinal story, too, to tell you guys someday. If you guys ever want to.
Andrew's obsessed with urinals, folks.
With airport toilets, because they're just weird and gross. And the fact that people use them still just, like, baffles me.
They use the bathroom in the airport?
I'm sorry, you're right. That the fact that they miss the toilet most of the time, and that people still
there you go. That's a problem.
Like to get it all, or they don't like to, but they get all of their shoes, and then they take their shoes off.
The altitude change really just messes up their aim?
No.
Or they're just slack and they're poor.
Here's what it is. You know what? I apologize, everyone. I know we promised CE content, but this is not CE content. So
I love how this is what comes after the episode that we're talking about.
It takes one person to barely miss the urinal and pee on the floor. And then the next guy doesn't want to step in the pee, so he steps back just a little bit, and then he's going to dribble all over the place. And then we keep stepping back, and then it's just urine all over the floor because people are 5 feet away trying to aim, and they just can't do it anymore.
You know, Andrew, you're really testing me because I've had a lot of wine to drink, and there are just so many inappropriate comments that I could be making.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. But
I really feel
I'm
as
so
if
proud. Well, hey, what was your new swear word that you learned today?
Tartlet.
Tartlet.
You're such a tartlet.
And I said if you'd use it on the podcast.
Thank you, Andrew.
Not me.
Not you, the other Andrew from tonight. Tartlet. You're such a tartlet.
So Andrew is from Young Innovations.
Don't be such a tartlet, Andrew.
And I honestly don't know what his title is.
Something big and fancy. I
think he is something big and fancy, but you wouldn't know it because you just... Well, actually, you kind of would know it because, like, when he talks, like, when he starts talking business, I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about this for a little bit, and then everyone else kind of zones out. I know he said a lot of things. I was like, come again, what? It made a lot of sense. Like when we talked about Amazon buying out Whole Foods. Whole Foods blew my mind. Yeah, crazy. Yeah. So, but this is such a rare opportunity that we're actually together. So I'm excited that they flew us out here for all of this. You know what's going to be weird is later on when we record our segments, because I don't know that we've ever recorded segments in person. Why is that a big deal for you? It's a milestone, Michelle. Oh. We've come so far. Did you see my post? Which I don't even think you liked it, but it's been 2 years since we've been friends. I don't think I liked it. I'm not sorry about that. Because on the thing, also there's a video. It says how many likes we've done. It's only like 270 or something like that. We don't like each other's stuff. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've liked a lot of other people's stuff way more than our stuff. Also, I feel like I don't ever see your posts. Well, it's almost like one of those things like, well, she already told me about this, so I'm just like moving on. Yeah, go ahead. I was just looking at the time. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, I've seen it. She told me about it. We've already talked about it. I don't need to... you don't need to like it. I don't need to like it. I don't want to show solidarity to our... I briefly saw that you posted family vacations. Didn't look at any of them. I wonder if they could dissect those 275 likes, how many were mine and how many were yours? Because I bet like 268 of them are mine, liking your stuff. That's such crap. No? I would go half and half. I mean, I occasionally like yours. I think if anything, I like your comments on other people's things. Oh, thank you, buddy. You read my comments. Well, because Facebook tells me it's because they're just like pictures of things, and she has to look at them and not have to read them, so that's good. No, Facebook tells you comment on things. Like Andrew Johnson commented on this thing. I'm like, what did that guy say? And then when I look at your comments on other people's things, it's angry, really long and really angry. And so I'm like, yesterday, did you see that her name is Anna, and then myself and Daniel pretty much have a is it GIF or GIF? GIF. Hey, Dental Hacks just had a whole thing about this just on their last episode about GIF or GIF. And so now I feel like we're trying to steal their content, so you better knock that crap off. My apologies, Dental Hacks. GIF. So we had a GIF war. We had a GIF war because people were talking about when you should see a patient after a bypass. Oh, yeah. I did actually see that. Did you see that? I saw Daniel's things more than I saw your things, but yes. He was probably a little bit more on point, but I also tagged him in it. Sorry, buddy. No, it's a good thing. He just had this conversation on another forum, and so everyone was like 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. And then I was like, that's not what the science just said, so... Dana, what is your thoughts on this? And he had like a whole conversation with like an oral surgeon and read all the articles from AHA and all this stuff. And so he posts articles, he posts research, and then literally like every other comment underneath that, it was 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. And I'm like, did anybody actually even read what he posted? Well, no, because they're answering the question that's way up here instead of like. But this was like 4 comments later. They don't read all the comments, though. They just read the question and then they answer. Without paying attention to everyone else's answers. And I get that. Okay. However. You should read some of the comments, because what if you're saying something that's not true or correct, and maybe you can go, oh, let me not look stupid.
and read what they're saying, or read what they're saying and say, okay, let me think about that and let's have a conversation about that part of it. But they don't. And everyone was 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, and then I said something, and everyone was 6 months, 6 months, and then Anna said something, and everyone's talking about 6 months. And one of our gifts were pretty much the equivalent of our head banging into something or hitting ourselves in the head with a hammer. It was like, just read it. Like, I understand you're saying 6 months, but are you actually reading the research that we just posted? Because I understand 6 months and then yielding to your cardiologist, but let's all be honest. Like, do cardiologists even understand chronic inflammation in the oral health?
I mean, maybe a lot of them, but...
Let me yield to you, but you really don't even understand. Like, you have a different perspective of the patient's overall health, but can we have a conversation about chronic inflammation, periodontal disease, rampant decay, things like that, and how excessive that is? You have no clue about that patient's side of things. So you understand the overall health, but you have no idea about oral health. Like, so let's all have an informed conversation about this, but you're just going to take the receptionist's word for it. When they call and they're like, how often do you recommend cleanings after double bypass? And they're like, oh, our normal protocol is 6 months. Okay, because you're parroting what someone else told you that has no research behind it. Don't laugh at me.
We came a long way from urinal pee to this. And then I'm like looking at that. What is that? Like, what do they call that above the curtain? Like
that's a valance.
A valance? What is that?
It's trees.
From what era?
Those are the trees that are on the sides of the mountains.
No, I mean, I know what trees are. I know what era the trees are themselves are from, but
this actual decor?
Yeah, what is that fabric
Andrew,
that they're on?
Maybe don't just focus on that and then take the whole room as a whole.
Well, when you're talking for so long, like, I have to look at other things.
That's where you focused? Was the valance.
Yeah.
Why don't you look at the bedspread or the bed skirt?
I mean, that's somewhat up to date.
Is it now, Andrew?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I stayed in a place the 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It was terrible. They had a key, like a literal key to get me into the room.
Is this your way of diffusing the conversation that I was just having?
I was thinking about also going on to that thread after we're done talking today and just put 6 months. Because that's all I pretty much heard over and over is want 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, want. So, yeah, I mean,
I think.
But we both have to go to bed after this. So, like, I mean, I'm already halfway asleep, but I feel like I just riled you up by like entertaining that notion that you can keep talking. So,
if you write 6 months under that post, I think we're done for this podcast.
I'm doing it then. Absolutely doing it.
I will find the most perfect GIF.
Thanks for saying that. No, you almost had it. So, RDH Under One Roof's coming up quick.
Oh my God, it is really.
Yeah.
Like, it's next month.
And I informed Michelle today that I want to do 21 interviews.
And I laughed in his face.
And I said, don't worry, you won't be there for half of them. So it worked. So, friends, please reach out. Also,
I really want to aim to do for RDH if you want to record our intro.
Yes. So, pending confirmation, because we haven't really talked to them in a while, but I think we're going to have a booth.
Doesn't matter. You can find us and we'll record it.
I know. But if we have a booth, it'll be so much easier.
I know.
We'll in, record the intro, and if you don't know what the intro is, it's okay. We'll tell you. But we want to have everyone's voices on there, and it's kind of fun. Your
unofficial podcast, hygiene podcast.
Dental hygiene. She can't even say it right. So, you know what? I will tell you what it really is on the day that we're actually recording. Well, come find us because that'd be so much fun. Yeah. It's on our banner and everything, so don't worry. We'll be able to find it, and then it'll be good. So do that. We'll record a bunch of interviews. If you want to like co-host, since Michelle's gonna be busy working and I'm gonna be podcasting.
Come see me at the Tepe booth.
Or don't, and then come co-host with me instead.
Well, that works too.
That's where I was going with the. If you want to co-host, since Michelle's gonna be working. Don't come visit.
Which is another dynamic to the unapproachable side of my...
Mm-hmm.
persona.
Yeah, you know what? Reach out to Michelle. Like,
I don't
we just found out
fine.
today
It's
that
fine.
she had like 1,000 people pending on one of her friends' request lists. She doesn't mean to. If you guys remember how
really
her and I met, it took months for her to like finally see my message about, hey, what about this
actually decent at
mission
social media.
thing?
It's just like these little like alcoves
Buddy, it's
of
fine.
things that I need to go check within social
Yeah.
media. I'm like, oh crap.
You're so good at so many things.
And then there's the little things that fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Dang it.
But anyway, so I'm happy to be here. Can't wait
Yep.
for Under One Roof. Can't wait for actually tomorrow and the next day, though.
We're going to learn a lot.
We're going to learn a lot. We're going to do some
hanging
podcasting.
with some cool people.
Yeah, we are. Matt's here.
Mm-hmm.
Linda Douglas from episode... That was... I don't know. But it was when Daniel and Linda and I were at
and
Townie
you did
meeting.
also Howard Friends podcast.
Quick little thing. And yeah, we did Howard Friends podcast. Linda is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. She is. I asked her if she would read me a bedtime story on the way
her
home
voice.
from... So she's British, and on the way back, I was like, so would you actually do story time with Michelle while Michelle drinks and you read it? That would be great.
I love it.
I think it's a
I
great
love
segment.
that a lot. Maybe we should have her do story time.
I would
Linda.
love it. I just wanted her to read me a story as I fall
that'd be
asleep
so
tonight.
good. Okay, so we're going to try and do that. And yeah.
Yeah.
Other things and stuff.
Other things and stuff.
But we have a great episode coming up.
We do. I was so excited to have this.
Yes.
Okay, so this is Olivia Wann, and she is, I've actually listened to her, and we talk about this in the podcast, but I saw her in like 2007 or 2008. She is an excellent presenter. She's got a country accent, which I love. She's from Tennessee.
Your drawl came out a little bit more.
Do you think so?
No, I was just making that up.
Oh, I was going to say, because sometimes it does.
It wasn't so bad this time.
But she makes OSHA, infection control, HIPAA, bloodborne pathogens fun. She puts it in a real life situation. So it's not just like, here is the things that you need to know. But she puts it with a story and like, here's where this has affected this office. Here's where this has affected that office. And so it makes it a little bit more real for you. And it almost goes like, it's like a smack in the face in some cases where you're just like, oh, okay, like it's time. We need to get it together. Because what if you were that office?
Yeah.
So I hope everybody enjoys this episode because it was a fun one. At least I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. I was busy.
Yeah, we were kind of pulling Andrew from other things.
We're going to stop right there.
Yeah, we were pulling him from other things.
Don't get me in trouble.
So, enjoy this episode with Olivia.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Sorry about that. We were doing a little recording beforehand. We just jumped on a little early.
That's fine.
Cool. All right. So this is Andrew. Andrew, this is Olivia.
Hi, Olivia.
How's it going?
Good.
I brought you on, and I was telling Andrew after the meeting was that it was super entertaining, but you had so much good information. And what we hear from hygienists is just a lot of uncertainty, and we have new grads and students and things like that are always listening to the podcast. So we just wanted to chit chat about that. But I do want to start with who you are, and because your background is pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, as I shared with you during the seminar, I've had a long journey in dentistry. I started out when I was 17. I was cleaning the dental office, and when the dentist had an opening for a receptionist, I applied. So I was 19 at that point. Actually, I applied when I was 18, and he hired someone else thinking I was too young. I applied again at 19 and was hired. And so I went to school at night to be a registered dental assistant. I was promoted very soon to office manager, and I worked there for 14 years. And then when I left, I became a soft dent trainer. I worked for them for 1 year, and I started my journey back to school. So I spent 10 years in school doing my bachelor's degree and my doctorate in law while growing the business that I had started in 1999. So it has been a journey.
It's you say it
It's a
like,
very
oh,
interesting journey.
right? Like I was just getting my doctorate in my law
No,
degree.
no big
No,
deal.
no biggie.
Well, I'm a nerd, so
And welcome to our Dental Nerd podcast because
There you go.
Exactly.
So what's really great is that you do have this dental background, and now were you always interested in infection control and OSHA compliance and things like that?
Well, you have to remember when I started, that was before the bloodborne pathogen standard. So we were actually practicing without gloves, and we didn't we didn't have the regulations that we have today. But when the bloodborne pathogen standard was published, I've always been a big reader, so I was really, really absorbed into the material and getting our office into compliance, and also learning about infection control, because I was actually better at infection control than I was a clinical assistant. I liked that part of it. I loved turning the rooms over. I loved helping the hygienist. And I enjoyed the patients too, but I just wasn't really good with dexterity. And that's probably why I'm not a dentist. I would do really sloppy restorations.
When you got your law degree, were you practicing law and then you went into OSHA? Like, how did that look like?
No, I was working as a compliance consultant and speaker way beyond going to law school. I thought, when I went back to school as an adult, I wanted to get a degree in healthcare management because it was a nice fit to consulting. And as an adult learner, as many of the listeners would probably agree, you do better than you think as an adult student than a young student. So it just seemed easy, and I thought, well, I'm not going to stop now. I'm either going to get a master's in management or be a CPA or go to law school. So I took the entrance exams and scored well enough to apply, and all of a sudden I was in law school. So I thought it would just benefit my business. But when I was licensed, I live in a small community, so all of a sudden I had law clients coming in, and I was the only full-time attorney in my county that first year. So I did quite a bit of different things and then made my way back to focusing on OSHA infection control. We do HR consulting. And the law practice, I do business law, setting up LLCs and so forth, employment law, and estate planning.
So when I think a lot of hygienists are a little bit scared of OSHA, right? Because there is a lot of you kind of have to delve into like what's it actually saying I'm allowed to do or not allowed to do. At least that's my first reaction. I'm like, wait, what does this actually say? Like it took 4 sentences to say what I think could be said in one. So what is it actually saying? Is that something that you run across a lot with either, I guess maybe does it look more like they don't want to comply or they don't understand enough to comply?
Well, purely based on my personal opinion, I think that when OSHA is delegated to a hygienist, that they're really not afforded the time to devote to it. So, if we're having a hygienist or an assistant wear that hat, they need to be able to allocate time in their schedule, and that's what's missing because we're looking for productivity, profitability, and if there's not a patient in the chair, the practice is not making money. And yet, when we delegate these important duties to them, there's not enough time in the day to adequately research it,
right,
keep their materials up to date, and train their staff. So it's more of a secondary hat, and I think that's what makes it difficult for hygienists to spearhead the project. So I always suggest that if they wear that title, to make sure they talk to the practice owner or management people to be sure they have adequate time.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect suggestion and oh so true. I'm sure in most offices. I was an OSHA compliance manager, but luckily I had admin duties on half a day during the week, so I could fit that in. I couldn't imagine seeing patients and then like once a year trying to get all that big binder of stuff done and then train everybody, right?
Exactly. And if it's, anytime I'm studying a complex area of law or reading something that's difficult, you get interrupted and you have to start all over again. And so I think for a hygienist, if they're relying on a broken appointment to use that time to do compliance activities, it's basically starting all over again because it's difficult to pick up where you left off.
Yes, right. Especially when you're trying to understand it. Like you're midway through like the sharps information and you're like, wait, what did I even read? So you got to do it over again.
Exactly.
So if you had to like pinpoint an area or a more frequented compliance issue, what do you see more often?
Well, usually when we're inspecting a practice for the first time, they do not do well with their paperwork, and that gets back to not having enough time. So maybe they did their paperwork some years ago and it's no longer current. And I can give you an example of a recent dentist that his office, one of his citations is that his work exposure control plan was not current, and when the OSHA official interviewed the employees, they didn't even know where it was located, so he was cited for that as well. So he actually did have an OSHA compliance manual. It was beautiful, but it was from 7-8 years ago, and nobody knew where it lived.
Oh, yeah. So half the battle is just knowing where the stuff is, how to find it, what it looks like.
Exactly. So what I've been encouraging offices to do, and when we consult with them, and they can certainly do this on their own if they're listening, is to, when you put your materials together, maintain an electronic copy in your practice management program. So create a patient and call it OSHA or HIPAA or whatever the compliance area is. And then save your manual in electronic version there so that it doesn't get lost in a move, or it wasn't transferred from an old file server or something to that effect, and then everybody has access to it.
That's a great idea.
Great. Yeah, that's really good.
Never thought
and that
about
helps
that.
with multi-location practices where they have an intranet and they can all access it. So that's what we've been advising clients to do.
Wow. I really thought you were going to say like they're wearing like gloves in the wrong place. They're, not changing their mat, like something like that. But I did.
Well, that is common.
Yeah.
That's common as well, Michelle. So that same dentist, another citation that he endured is that the hygienist was wearing the same mask with several patients. And so we have to emphasize that the mask is disposable, single use, one patient. And and maybe you're in a practice that there's budget constraints, but the fact is, what does it work out to be, like 14 cents maybe? So we need to take the mask off.
Every 14 cents counts to those dentists. Those owners. Actually, that just came up, Michelle. Did you see that in Dental Hacks Nation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a big thread on that one, and they were asking about, they're like, okay, who of you guys really changes your mask every time? And they're like having this little combat, and then a lot of them were saying, no, I just wear the same mask all day long, or, if it's not dirty, I don't throw it away, or I forget, and so I leave it on all day. And
I will say, when I was teaching now in the hygiene program and being a student, I got away with nothing. Like one strand of hair was out of my bun, I was getting in trouble for it. It was crazy. And then I would go to the dental school. I did once when I literally wrestled and papoosed a child at a dental, which was the most awful experience I ever had in hygiene school. And I got in trouble for it. But I went to a dental school and they're wearing Uggs with their scrubs and not even wearing a mat or a lab jacket. And I'm just like, how is this allowed? Why am I in boot camp? And then you can just do whatever you want at these other schools. So, and that's another thing I actually read a lot about is the lab coats and people with, being super hot and menopause and women and fighting over the thermostat. And you did bring that up in the meeting.
I try to bring it up as much as I can because I'm hot-natured as well. And, we have to wear personal protective equipment when we anticipate splash and splatter. And so when we evaluate what hygienists do and dental assistants, we fully understand they have to be fully protected, and that means that they're going to be sweating. And so the temperature of the office has to be comfortable for the clinical personnel. And that means your front desk people are going to complain that they're cold, patients will complain, but there's no way you're going to get a hygienist to wear a jacket if it's 78 degrees in there.
No, that's excessive. Even for me, that's the cold natured one in the office. So because that's always the thing. There's always going to be someone, I feel like, in the office that is trying to be compliant or knows some of the rules and regulations, but then coworkers are kind of flippant about it. And, it creates a little contention in certain situations. And it's almost like how far do you go to war with that coworker or the boss, the doctor, the dentist, whoever, and fight that battle, even if especially if you're the OSHA manager. Like, I mean, that's always at least for me, it was always the level of contention in the office was when it came to infection control and OSHA, HIPAA too.
Well, I think, Michelle, first of all, if a hygienist is nominated as the safety coordinator, they need to understand the level of authority that they have or do not have. And so rules are not any good unless they're enforced. Mm-hmm. And so we would suggest that, maybe the first time there's an infraction that there's just, that's encourage that person to comply. Maybe they need additional training. Maybe they need to understand the rationale behind the regulation or whatever the guideline is. And then you may have to resort to writing someone up. That's not as common in the dental industry as it is in other employment settings. But we need some kind of discipline to show that we are trying to get compliance. And then, I advocate disciplining the bonus. People understand money more than they do a little write-up paper. And so a lot of dental offices provide some kind of bonus incentive. And so that rather than, giving out a certain amount of bonus, why not evaluate their performance and subtract a percentage for the category, maybe it's safety, that they're not in compliance with. And you may get better results doing that.
That's an interesting idea. And it definitely, I like your idea of, kind of asking, like, is there going to be enforcement? If I am going to be the OSHA, compliance manager, are you going to have my back when I suggest, reinforcing this? Because I'm not sure every dentist would. And it's almost, maybe you need to really think on that. And if you're okay with it, okay, that's you. But for me, I'd be like, if you don't have my back, it's not the job for me. And I know I mentioned how we have a lot of new grads and newbie hygienists that just graduated, and this is something that's pawned off on them. Like, He could do it now, or he could do it now. Like, they just graduated, newbie in the office. And I think that that's a great suggestion to kind of empower them, make sure. But it also, gosh, I would hate to be coming in low man on the totem pole and then have to tell your veteran hygienist to wear your lab coat.
Well, I think that the new grad, maybe not necessarily young, because I remember being a law student and I was old.
Yeah.
But I think for the new grad, it's an ideal candidate to take on this job position because everything is so fresh on their minds. Right. And they're by the books because they're accustomed to studying and reading a lot of material and condensing it down. So I think that the new person is ideal to take on this responsibility. However, they have to be empowered with that level of authority, and they don't have to be the one disciplining. So like in some of the HR materials that I put together, you report the infraction to the doctor, and the doctor enforces it, or the office manager, however they tier that management, but it has to come from that reliable source that's responsible for that position.
It's almost like there needs to be something said in the office, like, here is the new compliance manager. She is not a rat, but she will get in trouble or he will get in trouble if they don't report it. So
Yes.
I'm asking them to come report it. But otherwise, I mean, to be that new kid on the block in that office and then get that without any kind of backing.
Put another target on your back.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, the cootie. Everybody needs a cootie queen, so sometimes that's what they call them, or cootie king. But, we have to remember, Michelle and Andrew, and you've probably seen this in your years of practicing, that, if someone's not in compliance and they're constantly working against the system, there may be performance problems in other areas.
Right.
So it's not just OSHA or infection control. There's probably other areas that there's problems with that individual. So, it's very helpful to compile this information so that if there is a termination, there's a valid audit trail of proactive effort on the employer's part in trying to get this employee to do their job.
That's a good point. So are there any new guidelines or can we define guidelines, regulations, recommendations? What's the verbiage that people get most confused with?
Well, it's a common question I get from dentists. They want to know, what do they have to do, which is regulatory, versus CDC guidelines that they're not going to do if it doesn't meet their budget. And so I like to start out explaining that OSHA is regulatory, and it's about employee safety. It is not a program to protect patients. So it protects employees. It is mandatory. Some of the states have their own state-run program. If a state doesn't have their own OSHA program, it follows the federal regulations. Now, for guidelines, CDC publishes guidelines for safe patient care, which also protects providers as well. But we have to keep in mind that the Department of Health is regulatory, as well as the Dental Board. And so when I did that seminar recently, Michelle, in South Carolina, I believe I pointed out that with this recent violation where the OSHA official came in and dealt with the dentist, she had a page of allegations against that practice. So when I came in, because the dentist hired me to meet with OSHA, she told me the first half a page were related to OSHA, and that was in her jurisdiction. But the bottom half of the page were infection control issues, and that was not in OSHA's jurisdiction, so she was turning it over to the Department of Health.
Wow.
So there you go. And so I think that for dentists to think that guidelines are optional is very deceptive, because there's other regulatory bodies that could pick it up. And I remind dentists too that you have to remember that this is malpractice. So if a patient claims that we made them sick and we don't have the documentation to defend ourselves, then that potentially could be a very successful malpractice claim against the practice by the patient.
And everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them, right?
And when it does, it's very stressful. It's very stressful on the staff, the individuals that are trying to be responsible for the program. It's very hard on the dentist, because even if the dentist can afford the fine, it's very embarrassing to have to endure that. Colleagues find out quickly, information is shared, and nobody wants to be the practice that's made the example for everybody else.
Lord, no. No. What is the biggest fine that you've ever seen?
With OSHA fines, I don't think they're near as costly as what we see with HIPAA.
Oh.
With HIPAA, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. With OSHA, they could be small monetary fines, or I can tell you an experience I had a couple years ago with an out-of-state practice where the employee, was a dental assistant, was terminated. She had actually made a complaint to OSHA. So it triggered the Whistleblower Act. And so OSHA was seeking over $30,000 restitution. And so it was a big mess that we had to straighten out. I was able to negotiate it successfully down to $2,000. But, anytime there's a complaint made to OSHA, you don't fire somebody, because now it's a big federal problem.
Wow.
And so and I think that's where we have to tune into our employees. So, if a hygienist is serving as the safety coordinator and we hear chatter of non-compliance, we need to tune into those employees and address their concerns and make sure we align that practice properly to be in compliance. And then, of course, ultimately it falls on the dentist's shoulders, or maybe it's a corporate body that they have to contend with, but our goal is to be successful.
So with those, because that is a thing, especially if you're a temp and you're going from office to office and you just see some terrible offenses. We hear this all the time or read it all the time on Facebook forums, and some people say not your circus, not your monkeys, don't worry about it, call it another, just get in, get out. And then some are no, this is a safety concern. This is not just about, you there for that day. It's about the people who are working there. And then maybe it is a CDC or a patient issue, infection control issue. So, would you err on the side of not your circus, or kind of maybe find a way to talk to them about it?
Well, of course, I always advocate in trying to resolve the issue. In my line of work, I work for the dentist, and so I would never advocate turning someone in, so to speak, because I work for the dental practice to keep them compliant. What I would suggest is that you make some friendly suggestions. For example, it may be that you know of a compliance consultant and you may want to get their card and say, hey, this person came to our practice or a practice I worked with and they made our job so much easier and it was fun. And now we don't have to worry about OSHA coming in because we're ready, we have our paperwork. So it's more in a spirit of let's resolve these issues rather than turn someone in. Now, when you deal with the dental boards, if there's something egregious or someone's patient safety is involved, that does give us a responsibility to make sure the patient is safe. And so I would be really concerned if it's a practice that has some serious errors.
Yeah. So, with some of those serious errors that we are hearing, well, I don't know if they're serious, but the water line issues, those are pretty serious, especially with the kids just, getting sick recently. Was it California? Yeah. So you see that. And then also now it's the whole handpiece issue and changing handpieces. And Lord, the arguments I see about that one is intense.
And what I usually do when I'm working with a doctor that is resistant to the message is, first of all, I remind them that I don't write these guidelines and I don't write these regulations, but there are bigger groups out there that's going to enforce it if you're not in compliance. Secondly, when you choose to be in business, just like myself, I have two practices, the consulting practice, the law practice. That's just part of being in business. It's costly and there's things that we have to do. If you don't want that responsibility, then maybe you're best suited to work as an employee or a contract provider, and then that's not your burden. But if you choose to be self-employed and have your own business, then that's part of the package deal you get. And so we have to take that very seriously. And I do want to mention, Michelle, before we move to a different topic, for the hygienists out there that are working as temps, it's really important that we understand the relationship of the temp with the practice. If the temp is working for a temp agency, then the temp is being paid by the agency and not the doctor, and the temp agency would be providing training, bloodborne pathogen training, CDC infection control, and so on. But if the temp is working directly for the practice, that changes the dynamics, because now whether you work 2 hours or you work 1,700 hours a year, you're the responsibility of the practice because you're employed by the practice.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and so when we're working with practices, when we do an on-site training, it's one of the things that we feature is the practice will get online training for 12 months, and we welcome that temp or the new hire to make sure they get their training. And that's why we developed it, because there's such a need for training, and if that safety coordinator / hygienist doesn't have time to do it, we have to find another platform.
Interesting.
It's so multi-layered on who's responsible for what and when, and the dentist. If the dentist is an associate and is now an employee, is covered differently than if the dentist is the owner and is no longer an employee but the owner.
That's correct.
It's very confusing. It's very hard to keep it all straight.
And luckily, Andrew, in our dental field, the risk of an injury is very low compared to other injuries, like maybe a logging company or a factory setting. But if the injury rate was higher, you would see a lot more litigation because of this very vague understanding of the classification of the employee.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And let me interject one more thing, Michelle. The other issue comes up is where they try to classify the hygienist as an independent contractor. And if you go to the IRS or the Department of Labor sites and read the description of an independent contractor versus an employee, then it's easier to recognize the fact that if you're directly supervised and you're not providing your own equipment and so forth, that you're probably an employee. So it may be a difficult stretch to call or classify the hygienist as an independent contractor just trying to get out of paying him the taxes.
That is so funny, because I maybe 2 hours ago was reading a forum that had about 200 and something comments all about that, and it was amongst a bunch of dentists, and some hygienists chimed in as well, and they were arguing over what makes someone a contractor, and if they're 1099 and they're paid less than like $600, and it was just like all these things, and nobody had like a clear-cut answer. And then I think that's where the dangerous part, especially for us, comes in, is that we've had one office tell us one thing. Maybe we read something online and it's like, okay, that makes sense. I'm under this amount, but we don't like delve into it anymore.
And I think you're referring to salary.
Yeah.
If you're paid salary exempt, I would personally not see the hygienist as salary exempt, because you have to meet this certain descriptor by the IRS and Department of Labor. And although the nurse practitioner could be salary exempt, the hygienist could be salary but non-exempt. So what that means is that if the hygienist works overtime, they are subject to being paid overtime. And if the dentist is not paying overtime, that's where they've had difficulties with the Department of Labor, and once there's an audit, everybody gets their overtime.
Wow.
So I think that's where they get confused and say, well, let me just call you salary. But if they're salary, they're non-exempt, which means they have to keep time cards and they will be paid overtime.
Labor laws is like a whole other podcast, because
Sorry about that.
No. I think your knowledge is so helpful, because that is probably, actually, I think Andrew, maybe last year we were looking for someone that could help us with labor laws and answer some questions, because people were like, being made to clock out and leave early and all these things. And they're like, it's costing me a fortune and I don't know what, and every state was different, blah, blah, blah. And our association wasn't able to help us out on that side either. So there was just so many things. Like, it's a scary little world out there if you aren't in the know or you're just trying to wing it.
And I think that's why these type of podcasts are helpful, because we really need it specific to the dental industry. Otherwise, the information is not as helpful, because our industry is so unique with patient care and how we function in a dental office versus an average employment setting.
It becomes very convoluted, like when you start throwing in all medical, because dental is so specific.
Right. And I have a brother and a sister that are both RNs. And, if they need to call out sick, they have other shifts of people they can recruit. If you have a hygienist or a dental assistant call out sick, then, especially in a rural community, there is no one to take their place for the day. So it does make a hardship. It makes a hardship.
It really does. It really does. So, we talked about a little bit about OSHA and how nice it is to be empowered if you are that compliance manager. We kind of touched a little bit on guidelines versus or CDC guidelines versus regulations, but let's talk about HIPAA for a second, if we can, because one question I have regarding social media, and if we post x-rays or intraorals that doesn't show the patient's name, face, or any like determining features of any kind, is that allowed?
No.
Oh.
Unless you get permission from the patient, because that is medical information and it is protected. And so if you choose to use a radiograph for educational purposes, then we need to get permission from the patient.
And that needs to be written permission, or can it be verbal?
Yes. I never go by verbal, because then they'll say, well, she didn't ask me permission, or I didn't know what it was about. So I always encourage to make sure it's in writing and it's in very simple terminology.
Because, honestly, that is literally what most of our Facebook forums are. Hey, I have this 49-year-old Black female. This is in, the vestibule. Help me out. And nobody thinks twice about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I would share concern for that. And I'm in these legal Facebook closed groups, but it's different because we don't share pictures and radiographs. They're just legal issues that could be any John or Jane Doe. Whereas in the dental community, when you're sharing pictures, that's classified medical information, and it is protected by HIPAA.
Especially radiographs where you could compare and say that this is that person.
Right. Right.
So written consent is the way to go for sharing on social media. Are you finding that social media is really kind of muddying the waters with HIPAA these days?
I think more so on an employee level, in speaking to different groups and offices, and I mentioned this at the seminar, what you post on your page is your personal business, it's your freedom of speech, but it can have an impact on us professionally. So, let's say we've got these hygiene students and they're still in student mode and they're accustomed to posting everything about their personal life, and now they're employed as a hygienist. What is on their page could have a negative effect on the practice. And so we just have to keep in mind the effects that it can cause when we post something that's questionable. We never want to post pictures of patients or anything like that.
Well, sometimes you'll even see like the back of patients' heads, or like maybe a hygienist. Maybe, for example, I see this a lot. The patient is on their phone and the hygienist snaps a picture of them with the patient. You can't see their face, but you see like the back of their head with the phone, talking about like, seriously, can this patient put their phone down? But that is, the iron, or the it's kind of interesting since you're on your phone taking a picture of your patient on the phone, but that's a whole other story. But definitely, that puts you kind of in a danger zone as well, I would assume.
Well, even if maybe that particular photo is not an issue, it gets everybody out of the, how would you say, the groove of not taking pictures and posting them. And so, even if a patient posts about their dental issues and treatment, we should never repost it. We should never post a response to a complaint, and never post pictures of our patients unless they've given us permission. And in posting, we should never post as the voice of the practice.
Yeah.
Unless that's our job responsibility to handle social media.
Well, I think it gets really, we get real brave, and we would, we would do things on social media. We wouldn't stand up in a room filled with 5,000 of our colleagues and say the things we're saying. And you forget who's on there. Like, you see your normal posters, but I'm like, there are people from companies, there are people that are reps, and they see that. And if you ever wanted to get out of the op and, maybe into something else, you have a kind of a stigma almost attached to you.
And for students out there, as an employer, when I'm looking to fill a position in one of my practices, I always go to the Facebook and look them up and see if their posts are public. And recently I overlooked a candidate. Her posts were public and there were naughty things on there. And I thought, well, that's just not a good fit for my practice. And so think about the potential dentist that might employ you, and they're looking at your page and there may be something offensive. And what I saw was like curse words on the T-shirt, real tight T-shirt, curse words, just some things that are not professional. So if we're holding ourselves out as a dental professional, we want that to show even with our regular posts. Or otherwise, use a different name or something that doesn't connect it to you.
That's true. And when I started teaching back in 2008, I had a student probably a year into it that was like, "You look like a really fun teacher." And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "I saw your pictures on Facebook." And I was like, "No, I'm private." And they're like, "No, I saw lots of them." And it was like whatever had happened before 2008 wasn't private. So it was like, even from like 2005, 2006, I was like, oh my God. You have to be really careful sometimes about that, because they can see it. Now, when you're social media, obviously that's kind of a different beast, but are you seeing some pretty frequented or common HIPAA compliance issues when you are doing a lot of these consulting things?
No, because I don't police employees' Facebook posts. So, when I'm doing an on-site assessment, that's where I find the OSHA and infection control infractions. When we're doing a HIPAA risk assessment, we're going through a series of questions that have to do with the administrative, physical, and technical safeguards of the electronic protected health information. And so, I don't have access to employees' social media, and unless that's brought up in the training, then I'm not seeing those infractions.
And are you coming across like, we'll walk out into the waiting room and say, Andrew Johnston, and everyone was like, oh, like that's so, yeah, I know.
Last name.
Totally, yeah. Don't dare use your last name. But then, here in the South, like, God, if I didn't say Mr. Johnston and I was just like Andrew, that would be some of the most offensive things I could have done to that person in that day. So are you seeing a lot of that and a lot of confusion as like, what can I say? How can I say it? What am I getting in trouble about?
What we see as a common violation is that they are speaking to parents in the reception area.
Oh, so more with pedo and stuff.
Right, and so after they complete the service with the child, then the hygienist will go out to the lobby and talk to the parents, or maybe it's a handicapped adult, and they'll talk in earshot of other people in the reception room. And that, that's subject to a complaint. And as I showed the seminar group in South Carolina, a picture of a letter that the Department of Health and Human Services sent to a dental office, explaining that they call the dental assistant a dental technician, that she impermissibly disclosed protected health information because she told the parent in the lobby that they needed to reschedule the child's appointment because her lips were chapped, and the parent made a complaint. So, that information should not be discussed in the lobby. They should have brought the parent behind the door that was closed or to the treatment room. And that's a problem we find, Michelle and Andrew, is that, like in city practices, metro areas, the buildings their space is so small that they may not have a conference room. And so you can't really do your job because there's nowhere to go. And then maybe in some of the rural settings they have more space, but the way the office is laid out, maybe they they still don't have these luxuries.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, if you have like a pod of like 4 rooms in like, or even like ortho bays, whether it's like chair, all 4 feet apart. Like, how does that come into play there?
For one thing, they're all getting the same thing, so it's not a surprise what the other patient is getting done. I think the ortho and pedo is such a different workplace setting than general practices or specialty practices like perio and so forth. But, it's really important not to discuss information specific to the patient or the individual, like treatment planning. Maybe the patient has a lot of work to do, and the hygienist has listed all the information in the system, and the front desk person is printing the treatment plan and discussing how much it's going to cost and what the insurance is going to pay or not pay. And now the patient is having to say, or the parent, I don't have the money for that. Now they're bringing up care credit or third-party financing, and that's really not information you want shared with other people, the fact that you cannot afford those services.
Right.
And we can never assume, well, I know that person, they're not going to be offended, because that's really not fair to that individual. So we just want to get into a better routine and be conscious that that information is protected.
And you also brought up a really good point at the meeting about spouses and children over 18 and how careful we have to be with that.
Yeah, I mean, because someone is married doesn't mean we can share the information. And the example I gave at the seminar is where it was not a dental office, it was a doctor's practice. The male patient was treated, and then not long after, the wife was treated. And the doctor asked, well, how's your husband's diabetes doing? And she was shocked because she didn't know her husband was a diabetic. And the husband called back, who happens to be an attorney, and said he was going to file a complaint because he did not want his wife to know or worry that he was a diabetic, because he's probably eating a bunch of ice cream and things he's not supposed to be eating. And so, just because they're married doesn't mean we can discuss that information. And then, depending on the state, because this would be state specific on how the state acknowledges a minor becoming an adult. So I just give you an example of Tennessee. So in Tennessee, unless you're 18, you're not considered an adult. Now, so when that child turns 18, in many people's minds, they're still a child. But at 18, they can actually restrict their medical information. And so another example I give, which is also a true story from one of our practices, is where the young person did not want his parents to know that he was chewing tobacco. And I'll ask the audience, can you restrict that information? Can he restrict that information successfully? Well, depending, like if it's in Tennessee, if he's not 18, well, mom and dad are going to find out about it. But if he's 18 years old, then he can restrict his own medical information and choose not to share that with his parents. So for hygienists, when you're doing your medical history updates, if that child just turned 18, we need to know, who is allowed to receive this information. We need to document it in the record before there's a complaint.
That just kind of brought up and I'm going to try to wrap this up because I don't want to take your whole afternoon. You're like a wealth of knowledge, and we could probably really just go on and on and on with this. So how often, or have you ever heard of a hygienist getting sued for malpractice because maybe they weren't doing the things they had time for, like blood pressure, medical history, just doing proper standard of care, but they were on a 30 to 45 minute prophy appointment, and it was perio maintenance or something like that?
I'll be honest with you, Michelle and Andrew, I've never experienced a hygienist being sued for malpractice.
Good.
In my years of practicing and also serving as a consultant, it falls on the employer, because there's this a legal concept called let the master answer. And so whoever the owner is, they have to answer for the mistakes made by their employees. So just like with my employees that work on the law side, if they make a mistake and I miss a deadline with court, and it's their fault, not mine, it's my fault all of a sudden. And so, if the appointments are too short and you're not getting your work done properly, it will fall on the dentist that's the owner, or, maybe in a corporate setting, there's a director that will be answering on behalf of the business. And in those situations, my advice is you need to really time these procedures, because if you don't have enough time, it's not going to be done correctly.
No, but it is such a battle. I mean, I think that's probably one of the like most complaints or most complained about issue is time and shoving just all kinds of stuff in. We're just struggling to keep our head above water, and just I don't know how you fight that beast. I really don't, other than finding a different office to go to.
Right, and I think that's, in a practice that is more focused on dollars, and you will see that more. But I get to see the other side of dentists that I would love for hygienists to think about, is the side where we see a dentist struggling with overhead issues, and maybe the hygienist is on a daily rate and the doctor is frustrated because maybe the hygienist has left early several days, and then the one day they're asked to stay a bit later because the patient ran over. There's strife. And so I think there needs to be good communication between hygienist and dentist, so that we can be more forgiving of each other and work more as a team than against each other.
Well, actually, we've had quite a few dentists on, and they have definitely spoke that side of it. And it is always a good reminder that we do need to be working together as a team. Sometimes you get really frustrated and you challenge them like, give me, I need, but we're not really, even though it's not a marriage, it's kind of a marriage.
Yes,
in the sense that you got to see the other side, see what their challenges, their struggles are, and how can you help them so that they can help you, almost.
Right. And they'll work really hard for that dentist if they know they're appreciated. So don't like dentists to refer to the hygienist as my girls. Yeah. I'll get my girl in here.
I don't like when I call the girls either.
My guy. Probably doesn't come up as much for you, Andrew, but
it doesn't at all.
I try to be conscious when I'm referring to my staff members with my clients, especially my law clients that come into the office, that I will have a team member to assist you. Or maybe I'm messaging a compliance client, my team member so-and-so will get back with you, because I want the client to have as much respect for my employees as they would for me. Because when I worked in a dental office, I felt like sometimes the patients would be all nice to the dentist, and then they would, if they were upset about something, they would act ugly to me that they would never do to the doctor.
Right. Yeah. It's the whole thing, like anything changed in your health history, no surgeries, nothing. Let me lay you back. I can't lay back. The dentist comes in. I have just had a heart attack. I had a stroke. Actually, I have a joint replacement in all of my joints. And I could go all the way back, put me on my head. I don't care. Like it's this kind of the same thing. But no, I think you make a great point, and you've made a lot of great points. Are there anything that you really want team members and office members to know? We're definitely going to get your contact information, because I do have one question, actually. If a hygienist or assistant or any dental professional wants to get into the compliance game, do you have any suggestions for them?
Yeah, I do. I get that question a lot from different people that attend seminars. And I would suggest that, first of all, you need to be a really good reader and read everything that you can get your hands on. Definitely need to be a member of OSAP.
Okay.
And also, for credibility, like before I was licensed as an attorney, I went through the general industry OSHA outreach training, because I thought it was a good way to show credibility to doctors that I was actually approved by Department of Labor as a trainer. I think that's a good credential to have.
Okay.
And then it's very difficult when, you have a hygienist that's working part-time in an office and then trying to be a part-time consultant. And one paycheck is really helping the other to get it going.
Right.
But at some point, you have to make that leap of faith and keep your clients regular. So just like you would keep your prophy schedule every 6 months, scheduling your patients, then with your consulting clients, you want to get them on that annual basis so you can develop a good client base that can support you in your new business.
Great advice. Anything else that comes to mind where you're just like, I would love for dental teams to know this? I keep seeing this. I keep hearing it. Here's the facts.
Well, once again, I would suggest that you have to be a good reader. If you don't like to read, then it's probably not a good field for consulting or being the OSHA coordinator, because you're having to read a lot of information. And so in choosing someone to have that assignment, they need to be detail-oriented, because there's a lot of little working pieces that we have to put together. And if that's not you, if there's students out there listening or hygienists listening, you don't have to be all things to be wonderful as your job as a hygienist or assistant and so forth. Find out what you're good at, and that's what you need to focus in on, because I've worked with some amazing people, and they love people, they love working with their hands, and there's nothing ever wrong with that. The main thing is enjoying your career. If you don't like your career and you're unhappy, then it's time to make a move, and make a move quickly, because we want to enjoy that journey.
Great advice. We couldn't agree more. We really do appreciate your time. I know you have a law practice, a consulting practice. Thank you for taking, an hour of your day to even chit chat with us. I'm so sure you're busy. How can people find you and your office at the compliance side of things and consultant side?
Well, my law practice website is pretty simple. It's Olivia Wann, and that's WANN.com. And then for the compliance practice, it's modernpracticesolutions.com. My email address is the same for both businesses. It's olivia@oliviawann.com, and I'm happy to entertain questions. If some of the listeners would like to ask some information, I'm happy to give as much information as I reasonably can.
I will say you're extremely approachable, and I appreciate you for that.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me, Michelle and Andrew.
Oh gosh, no, you've been great. This is wonderful information. We might have to have you back for labor laws one day, because I'm sure the questions would go on and on and on with that side of it. So we'll definitely.
Well, I'd love to come back.
Well, we would love you to be a returning guest. Well, thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we do appreciate this.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Listeners, I want to tell you a story I found on the web, which makes this Scaling the Web with Andrew.
Okay. So, Michelle wanted us to record this conversation that we're having about our friend Matt. We're going to have him do both of our segments as a sign of friendship and love. And then Michelle started berating me. And then Matt started reading the Scaling the Web that I chose, and a conversation ensued about why this. So there's that.
Here we are.
So here we are.
So Andrew handed me his computer, and there is a website called clinic95.com, and there's a blog that Ben wrote. I don't know who Ben is. We're not sure who Ben is. But Ben wrote a blog about why he hates mouthwash.
Right. And
my question was why.
And
Your question was, who is this dude?
I said, who is this person, and why does his opinion matter enough to write a blog about that we should talk about?
And I think what Matt's misunderstanding and what Michelle wanted us to record this part of it was because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who these people are or why they write blogs or anything like that. It is on the web. And Michelle, talk.
Well, see,
talk, but you didn't bring a microphone for me.
See, the reason I asked why it matters is because
always winning, Andrew.
We've already today, when I've been hanging out with you guys, been talking about the credibility of things that you find. So
no, we're talking about the credibility of my segment, not Andrew's.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you misunderstand that part?
I must have.
Okay, so let's back up. So the whole point of the podcast is to have great guests who bring some credibility, and Michelle's segment.
And then
the first
Andrew
portion
brings it down.
Yeah, the first portion is just BS with Michelle and I, and then my part is a continuation of BS. So it's BS, great interview, BS again, then great finish.
Yeah, truth.
Okay.
But
So-
some of your scaling the web, I think, is pretty good.
Some of it.
You mean the one that I referenced you on?
Well, I think
because
there's
that was a
actually
good
quite
one.
a few that are good. I think it's interesting some of the stuff you found. Like you know which one I thought was interesting, and it was
The pizza one in Brazil that ended up having a dental thing? Yeah, that was a good one, too.
Quality.
that was not what I was going to say.
I felt like it was.
Quality.
The one I liked that I thought was interesting was the one that had a kind of a connect to me being in Wisconsin, was about the male hygienist that works for Dental Associates, that they started a union.
Oh, yes.
And ironically, he's my boss's hygienist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept meaning to circle back to that one about unions and hygienists. And
Yeah.
that's where Mike comes in. Mike's supposed to help us stay on track from now on.
Yeah, I heard on one of your episodes he's like official now.
Yeah, he's actually doing a lot of the back end stuff with the CE part now.
Yeah.
So he and
That's cool.
CE Zoom are doing their thing. Okay, so if
So you want me to talk
if it's
about
not
this?
good enough,
No,
then
I'll talk about it. So-
okay, hold on. How about I'll read it and then you can chime in with commentary about how awesome it is.
That laptop's heavy.
Hey, it's old, man.
It's heavy.
This laptop has gone through a lot. Okay. It is common knowledge here at Clinic 95 that I am not a massive fan of mouthwash. I feel like this guy's British.
Yeah, because they give some
Is he British?
they give some
Oh my
British
gosh, don't do
symbols
that.
at the end,
See,
and I think it has to do with volume, but I don't know what the symbol stands for.
Okay. I'm not a massive fan of mouthwash. I often discourage my patients from using it, and here's why. It doesn't actually do anything. Bum, bum, bum.
See, I mean, that's a
This-
real generalization there.
The sticky plaque on your teeth needs to be mechanically removed with toothbrushes, interdental brushes, and floss. It can't be washed away. It's like trying to clean your car by chucking buckets of water at it. You need to get in there with brushes to remove the dirt. So mouthwash doesn't wash anything. The name is just a clever marketing.
So far, I do not agree. I think that there are some mouthwashes that are good. Most are not. I think he's generalizing quite a bit there.
Well, let me continue to see if he addresses your concerns. Matt, anything so far? You good?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. The fluoride found in your toothpaste is there to help strengthen your teeth. An average toothpaste contains 1450 parts per million of fluoride, enough to have a beneficial strengthening effect on your teeth. Is that a true number, 1450? I feel like that's lower. I thought I heard it was around 1200 parts per million of fluoride in your average toothpaste.
Yeah, it's usually around 1100.
Yeah, okay.
Probably depends on the toothpaste.
So maybe from England they might have it a little higher or something. I don't know. Most people brush with the paste, getting all of that lovely fluoride on their teeth. Then use mouthwash, which basically rinses it all off, replacing the high percentage fluoride of the paste with a much lower percentage from the mouthwash. Mouthwash. It's like subliminal marketing for mouthwash. Sorry, guys. I mean, you're welcome. I mean, give us money. Which is bonkers. Your teeth actually get far more fluoride if you don't rinse the mouthwash after brushing, which is funny because a lot of people rinse with water after brushing as well.
Well, yeah, but it says not to do that on most toothpaste.
And
Yeah,
I never really thought about that until a few years back.
We use
About
way
rinsing.
too much, and we rinse it away.
Wait, we
No,
use
but I
way
mean-
too much what?
Toothpaste.
Oh,
Yeah,
so I
but
tell
that's
people to use
marketing.
more.
I mean, you watch
Why?
a toothpaste commercial. Big, long
Oh,
tube.
absolutely. It's
But,
definitely marketing.
but I never thought about the concept of after you brush your teeth, not rinsing out with water.
Right. Leave it on your teeth.
Until
but don't
more
you tell them
recently.
to do that with Prevident or Clinpro
Yeah,
or something like
yeah.
that? So
But-
it's like we lost it somewhere in translation.
With over-the-counter.
Yeah, exactly. But
But there are mouth rinses, mouth washes that have fluoride in them.
True.
why would you tell your patients to use more?
Because it's not my low risk populations. If they are unwilling to get Clinpro or Prevident or whatever, I say Glomit on there, just don't eat it.
See, I don't.
Here's why. Okay, if you only put a pea-sized amount and you start in the upper right every single time, I feel like by the time you're done, especially if you use an electric brush, it's not going to be on the thing anymore.
It's in your mouth.
You still think it's going to coat evenly?
Yes.
I feel like it won't. I'm not a scientist.
Well, at that point, the point of that's you're doing it for a. That's going to sound really good. I'm sure the audio is going to be excellent. He's waving the microphone in front of my face. It's going to be really great. I feel like at that point, it's the abrasive thing of the toothpaste, the abrasive part of the toothpaste that you want to use on every part of the mouth. It's going to be in your saliva. It's going to surround your teeth and coat your teeth. It's in there.
You are probably right.
Not direct application that makes it work. It's sitting in your mouth, in your saliva, in the curvicular fluid, if it even gets down that far in some cases. But I think too much toothpaste distracts from the brushing technique.
Okay, I disagree with that last comment, but almost everything else, I almost believed with what you're saying.
But if they brushed and then rinsed with a mouthwash that had fluoride in it, that would eliminate your concern.
Do you know the parts per million of, like, ACT or...
Well, like,
Crest?
Listerine Zero, the one that has fluoride, I think it's... I'd have to look,
All right,
though.
let's finish. We'll see what Ben says. There are, of course, a few exceptions. So let me explain. Ulcers. If you have ulcers or have had any trauma in your mouth, Peroxyl is fantastic. It is a hydrogen peroxide mouthwash which helps kill bacteria by producing oxygen, which is what makes it fizz when you use it. However, it shouldn't really be used for longer than a week. And if you prefer a more natural approach to things, a teaspoon of ordinary salt mixed in a tumbler of water used as a rinse twice daily will usually help keep the area clean until it heals. I don't know why tumbler was funny to me, but it was. So this is the only time that I recommend using any product in addition to your normal toothpaste. Although, if you suffer from bad sensitivity, it's fine to try Listerine Advanced Sensitive Mouthwash twice a day. Just make sure you use it at different times than to when you're using your sensitive toothpaste. More on this later. Thoughts so far?
What about Caries Free and OraCare and Closis and all the other rinses that have other things?
Yeah, I think there's therapeutic uses.
Yeah.
But I think the point he's trying to make is the way that traditional mouthwash is marketed on TV or in ads is that it's going to wash and rid your mouth of
where you
plaque.
need mechanical
but
removal.
it may be killing it, but not disrupting it, or it's disrupting it, but it's not removing it.
That. I just disagree with him saying this is a generalized thing and saying none of it works.
Okay, so then he goes into chlorhexidine, which it's called Corsadil or whatever it is over there. He said, you know the one, all the really creepy adverts of people spitting blood and teeth. Yes, the marketing certainly is effective. So we're missing out on something there.
Apparently.
Which, maybe you can Google that real quick.
What is it?
It's CORSODYL. And it's an advert, not a commercial. I would really like to see the video of people spitting blood out. So we'll look that up, and I'll keep going. A lot of people use it. Are you one of them?
I bet this is just... let me just double check, but it looks like Parodontax, but for the European market.
Could be.
Also
he said
Stannis fluoride.
is the brand name for a chemical called chlorhexidine, which is usually a prescription-only medicine in the United States. Unfortunately, it's rarely available here in the UK.
It's put out by GSK, and it looks like it has chlorhexidine.
That doesn't look like a video to me.
Oh, I was looking up the product, man.
You about the product?
Why do you want to watch people spit blood, dude?
Okay, while you're looking that up. And another reason I discourage anyone from buying it and using it as a daily mouthwash is because the side effects are just awful. The most common is heavy staining on your teeth. And I'm not talking about after prolonged use. I mean stains forming on your teeth after just a few uses. And they'll keep darkening the more you use it. These stains can progress onto your tongue, giving you a nasty, thick, brown, furry coat that in some extreme cases can turn black. Problems with staining. Anyone care about staining?
I mean, I would care about staining.
Now, I've never used this myself, but if you have good home care, like, you know, you're brushing your teeth and stuff, are you still going to get the same stain?
From the rinse? I think with the stannous fluoride, if it's not created in a way that makes it more stable, I think, then you're going to get staining from it. It's staying on your teeth.
Probably depends on the concentration, too, because, like, some toothpaste now are stannous fluoride, but it's a lower dose.
Because I feel like some of my patients that use it and are, like, doing a lot better, I've seen a lot better results, whatever, I feel like they don't have as much stain. And then the people that have, like, a crap ton of stain don't have as healthy of results either. And I don't know if there's a correlation because they're just not, their home care is still terrible. They're still using the product, but they're hoping that that's going to be like a wonder pill and fixing it. Dude, where's the video?
Oh, Jesus, for the love.
That's your only job right now. It's killing me. Okay. As if all of that isn't gross enough, it can have a dramatic effect on your palate, with patients reporting that their mouths tasted burnt, acrid, and chemically afterwards.
Oh my God. Seriously.
Matt, you're missing out.
This lady literally dreamed that she was...
When you brush your teeth,
oh
could
my
be
gosh.
a sign of gum disease, a leading cause of tooth loss. Corsadil mint mouthwash and Corsadil toothpaste are clinically proven to help stop bleeding gums. Because losing a tooth in real life is worse than a bad dream.
Now, that is an intense...
That's a great way to market better oral health than the way we do it now.
Fear-mongering. I'm down with it.
You are great at it. Okay. Look, if your gums are bleeding, there's a problem. But don't turn to a bottle of disgusting goo you buy in the supermarket for the answer. Just pop in and see me here in the clinic, and I'll advise you of your own bespoke cleaning routine to stop the bleeding. Easy. And there are a few more things that you guys can look up later on. But it's clinic95.com/y-i-hate-mouthwash.html.
So the level of fluoride in mouthwash, sodium fluoride, 0.02%, compared to crest cavity protection is 0.24%. So quite a bit less.
I can't do those conversions of parts per million, though.
Yeah.
It's 10%. 10% of what's in toothpaste.
It's not very
so
good.
Really small percentage.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Thank God we have Matt here.
We have Google. That's great, man. Can you imagine trying to do this before? Okay.
You wouldn't have had those answers for days, or you had to go to a store and look at the back of a package.
Yeah, that's for sure. I have nothing else.
Is that it for your Scaling the Web?
Yeah.
Thanks for being a guest on Scaling the Web there, Matt.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
It's about that time. Grab your blanket and a glass of wine. It's story time with Michelle.
For Storytime with Michelle, this time it is with a beer that our buddy Matt brought us, a Shake a Day Indian Pale Ale. So I've veered from my normal wine drinking. Thank you, Matt. It's super hoppy, though. Is this the kind of beer that you like?
It is.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll put hair on your chest. Okay. So because we had, in this episode, we talked about infection control, we talked about OSHA and HIPAA and all these things, I decided to pull an article from American Journal of Infection Control that Noel Kelsch, Cheryl Davis, Gwen Essex, Lori Lauder, and Dorothy Rowe wrote. It is from 2017, and its title is Effects of Mandatory Continuing Education Related to Infection Control on the Infection Control Practices of Dental Hygienists. I think I got this survey. Do you remember getting a survey?
No.
Okay. You probably didn't look, Andrew.
Probably.
So,
Compliance with infection control recommendations and requirements is critical to the delivery of quality dental care and necessary to ensure the safety of both patients and clinicians in the dental setting. In 1993, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released guidelines for infection control in dental settings, and these guidelines have continually changed as advances in scientific knowledge have been evaluated. Attendance at continuing education courses related to infection control is one way to stay abreast of these changes. In 2008, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention conducted a study that demonstrated that compliance with guidelines was higher among dentists who had taken more infection control CE compared with those who had taken less. Several studies have assessed dental hygienists' knowledge and practices with respect to infection control guidelines. Dental hygienists have been found to be knowledgeable about infection control guidelines, to have implemented them, and be compliant with most of them. Practice Acts in 18 states require that dental hygienists complete infection control CE for license renewal, whereas the other states do not have this requirement. To our knowledge, the effect of these states' requirement for infection control CE have not been examined. Therefore, the purpose of the study was to assess the effects of mandatory continuing education related to infection control on the infection control practices of dental hygienists. So pretty much they sent out a survey. It was an 18-item survey. They sent it to, 7,353 dental hygienists opened the invitation. Email message. 2,159 started the survey, and only 1,932 completed it. Way to go, hygienist.
It's too long.
For a response rate of 29%. I wonder if they actually were like, we don't know these answers, I don't want to answer it fully, and just closed out of it. So, of all 50 states and the District of Columbia were represented, 848 respondents were practicing in the 18 states with the requirements for infection control courses, and 1,086 were practicing in the remainder of the states without that requirement, and 98% were women. Some of the things they were looking at: wearing utility gloves when cleaning clinical contact surfaces, not having patients close their mouths around saliva ejectors, not wearing single-use masks for more than one patient, sterilizing hand pieces between patients, washing hands before and after each patient, reading and following product label directions for EPA-grade disinfectants, and not making wipes with EPA-grade disinfectant in cotton 2x2 squares. Oh my God. Not wearing personal protective equipment outside of the clinical area. An average percentage of what? I don't know what that means. Never mind. Moving on from that. Let's see what all of that came down to. Let's see. Number of units of continuing education related to infection control. Let's see what the majority here was. So the ones that had mandatory CE, they were taking about, 41% were taking anywhere between 3 to 5 CE units. And then the ones that were without mandatory we're taking about 1 to 2. Mandatory continuing education courses related to infection control did affect dental hygienists' infection control practices. A greater percentage of respondents who were practicing in the 18 states with mandatory continuing education were in compliance with the recommended and regulated infection control practices and reported more infection control CE activity than the percentage of respondents from the states without the requirement, indicating the need to establish mandatory infection control CE in all states. Why the F is that not a thing?
But here's my question. Did it say that if you had more education, you had better infection control practices?
Let me
because
the
other one said in the states where they weren't required, they were still taking between 1 and 3. So they were taking it.
They were taking it just between 1 and 2. So the other table they give you is number of years since last continuing education related to infection control. What
I'm asking is, did more education equal greater adherence to protocols?
Let's see. Okay, so in those areas that I just mentioned, like wearing utility gloves when cleaning clinical contact surfaces, respondents in compliance in the states that require it, 16 were... I actually don't know what these values actually are. Let me see.
Because like in our state, in Wisconsin, we, for hygienists, we're required to take infection control CE, but the dentists are not.
How's that a thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Let me finish this discussion and then I'll go to it. Let's see. However, less than half of both groups of respondents were in compliance with these 8 practices from the infection control guidelines. This
Right.
low...
That's what I'm saying. So just because you have more education doesn't mean you're compliant.
So this low compliance indicates the need for educational programs to increase the awareness of infection control guidelines and the potential risk of transmission of microorganisms to patients and clinicians without compliance. Entry-level dental hygiene programs could allocate more time in the curriculum to address the rationale of the specific practices related to infection control guidelines and the importance of keeping abreast of the changes throughout the student's career. The respondents in this study represented all 50 states and D.C., and reflected the sex distribution of the dental hygiene population, but the results may not be generalizable to all dental hygienists throughout the United States. The database of this national trade magazine is large, approximately 32,000, but this number may include duplicate and inactive email addresses, blah, 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 blah. Additional, there was self-reported. Previous studies have. So, I mean, I don't know if you could figure out that from... Let's see. Respondents varied in their compliance with 8 practices.
So I think my point is maybe I agree. Requiring it is good, but just because you take more doesn't mean you're necessarily more compliant.
The percentages of respondents in compliance were significantly greater for respondents from states with the requirements than from states without the requirements.
There you go.
The average percentage of respondents from states with requirement in compliance with the 8 practices was 44%, was significantly greater than the average percentage of those that were in a state without, which was 40%.
So 44 to 40. And that was statistically significant?
By a p-value
because 44% compliance not very good.
A p-value of 0.01. That's
44% is bad.
Significant statistical significance.
That means
crap.
They're compliant with 3 out of the 8 that they asked about. So 5 areas that they're not compliant with. That's not good.
Welcome to America. Canada doesn't have this crap.
Yeah, Sarah actually mentioned the infection control checklist that we just developed. That's on our website. She was talking about it on one of your episodes recently when she was just on.
Sarah Thiel from CE Zoom.
Yep, Sarah Thiel, my friend. And she...
you heard that, right? Andrew gets real territorial when you start saying your friend, not our friend.
Oh, she's our friend. She's our friend. She's a friend of ours.
It's a friend. Andrew, it's okay. It's okay.
My friend.
He's definitely pouting over there.
But yeah, when we put that out,
6:15.
when we were starting to promote that, one of the biggest things we got pushback from was about the sterilizing handpieces between patients.
Oh, that's a huge thing right now.
It's a huge thing. But that's the guidelines.
But it's not a
But it's
regulation.
not being done.
And
No. Well, none of it's regulation.
No, but I guess eventually kind of. So,
but
you gotta
some
listen.
states do. Doesn't Washington State regulate that? There's some states that regulate infection control.
Oregon has a requirement for it in your licensure.
I know you're on the back end of this podcast, but if you listen to the interview section, she talks about that really good.
And it's time to go.
Cheers!
Cheers.
I'm going to
Cheers.
go drink more with all the people from American Eagle. It's great.
All right. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.